Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, Professor.
Great. I just wanted a confirmation that you people are hearing me so that we start. I'll just take around 2 or 3 minutes just to share a few things relating to what I said last time. And then thereafter, introduce our visitor who will be talking to us for about 30 minutes, and then thereafter I'll come in with the continuation of the lecture. May I ask you to mute, kindly mute, especially those who are talking. Kindly mute, like Edmond Agava, Hassan. Okay, let me help you and mute you. Please do not unmute when I mute you. Right. Right. So for those who are just joining, welcome to this lecture, and especially my colleagues like Dr. Austin Mwange from Zambia. Welcome. Kindly unmute and speak for a second, Dr. Austin Mwange. We are not hearing you, Dr. Austin Mwange. Maybe your internet connectivity is not very good that side. We are not hearing anything. Okay, maybe when it improves, I'll give you an opportunity to speak, but welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, we started our lecture last week, and that lecture was about conducting systematic literature review. So we completed part 1, and we are trying to post that on the YouTube. For those who missed the class, you can actually go to my YouTube. You'll find that lecture there. So today this will be part 2 of the lecture, and then we shall have another follow-up lecture. I did promise last time when I met you that I'll bring the librarian to give you additional information about the resources available. And I also promised that I'll invite my my colleague Olupot who will be with us. And then we are with Elasu last week, if you recall. So Elasu and Olupot will be coming in to talk about a few things here and there. So we started our lecture on conducting systematic literature review, and this was the presentation outline. If you recall, we looked at the introduction and importance of a good literature review. That was general, the purpose of good literature review. And then I think we stopped around number 3, a typology of reviews. And under that, we looked at a number of reviews, like what you call theoretical reviews, argumentative reviews, if you recall, plus a number of others, right? And I think I just gave you some kind of overview about some of those reviews. And then thereafter, we started on systematic literature review. So we stopped around number 3, and somehow we had an introduction of systematic literature review. So we hadn't even reached number 4, where we have comparison of systematic literature review. So certainly today we shall be starting somewhere there. Now, if you remember, I told you that it's important for you to be on top of the area or discipline where the topic is located, right? Or probably the area where your research is being undertaken. And I gave you a very good example using a forest, that if you go to a forest and you want to understand what is happening in the forest, you need to get the tallest tree. And when you get the tallest tree, you must climb and sit on top of the tallest tree so that you are able to have mastery of what is happening in the forest. And then thereafter, you'll be able to do a number of things. So when researchers usually ask you a question, or scholars or examiners for that matter, ask you a question as to what your contribution to knowledge is, they expect you to have conducted a thorough review and having an understanding of what is happening in that area so that you are able to add something to the discipline. We know very well that knowledge grows incrementally, and knowledge is international, right? Just making a statement that I've not seen any study conducted about this aspect of, let's say, energy efficiency in Uganda, and therefore my study is the first of its own kind. That is really very deceitful. Knowledge grows incrementally and knowledge is international. It knows no boundaries. So possibly somebody has done a study about the same in another developing country or a context that is similar to yours. Today I was reviewing a paper in one of the journals in Emirate. And this study was conducted in Zimbabwe. And the author was just saying that it is the first study that he's aware of, right? And really when I read through the paper, I saw the kind of ignorance the authors had. So what I did, I recommended a number of journal articles that they could read. I gave them about 20 published journal articles between 2019 and 2023. And I asked those people to actually read those papers and make sense of the papers and the synthesis so that they are able to understand what is happening in that area of financial literacy, right? So, and we usually make those mistakes, thinking that we are contributing knowledge when in the actual sense, we probably have failed to get the papers, maybe because we don't subscribe to those journals and probably databases, or possibly because of laziness, we don't want to read. So we end up omitting those very important papers that address the kinds of areas that we are investigating or want to investigate. So it's always important, as I told you last time, for me, systematic literature review is the first step for any PhD student to start thinking about an area, right? And also be able to talk about a contribution to knowledge, right? For those who attended my lectures on the philosophy of science and economics, I think it was last year, you may have realized that at some stage, I did present to you that important area of philosophy that talks about realism, right? Where you start by abstracting reality, and then thereafter you start conceptualizing, actually theorizing. And that can also be an important aspect where you can contribute knowledge, especially if you are a realist person, or if you have a realist philosophical orientation. And it doesn't matter in every discipline, realism is there in economics, in finance, in marketing, and other disciplines as well. So today, I decided to bring somebody from the library. I talked to the librarian, and the librarian gave me an individual who will be taking us through what is available at Makerere University and Makerere University Business School in terms of literature. Last time I told you that it's important to go to Google and you start with the Google Scholar and then identify those papers that you can review, especially the ones that relate to your subject of investigation. But I also told you that if you're going to do a good systematic literature review, you must at least visit one or two or more databases for you to pick that information before you even start talking about the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So allow me, ladies and gentlemen, this evening to introduce to you Mr. Hassan Sengova. Hassan, are you there? Hassan, are you there? I just want confirmation that you are
Yes,
around.
Professor.
Yes, I want to introduce to you Hassan Sengova, who works in the library section. And for quite some time now, he has been handling resources that scholars actually need. So Hassan, I want to hand over the microphone to you so that you take us through what you are supposed to take us through. We had agreed that Hassan will use about 30 minutes, but feel free if you want to extend and use about 40 minutes or so. I will start from where you will stop. Over to you, Hassan.
Thank you, Professor. And thanks for the opportunity to speak to our PhD students this evening. My name is Hassan Sengova. I work as the Institutional Electronic Resources Coordinator. And for some time, like for the last, I think 7, 8 years, I've been dealing most with the PhD support. Professor, if you let me freely talk about this passionate thing I do, I would take off all the time for the lecture, but I'll behave. For today, I'm only going to introduce to you the resources that we have at the university. And I'll remember to put my contacts in the chat so that you guys can come and the students, our PhD students, can find me and we sit one-on-one, or a few of you, or you can even arrange a class. I come and present, you ask questions, we practice and so forth. But you cannot, the only thing is that you can't avoid me if you're doing PhD. We will always cross each other's path. Yeah, why? Because Professor will always send you to me for resources, for the new databases, and even those resources that we subscribe to, we will always have to come and communicate to you people. You can't run away from electronic resources with how the PhD is designed of late. The host, kindly allow me share my screen. I make a few remarks. I would love to share that screen. Is it visible? Hello?
Yes, the message we see here is that Hassan has started screen sharing. Oh, we are there.
Mm-hmm.
We can now see.
It's something to do, it's an Excel worksheet. Let me assume
we are seeing it.
Okay, perfect. Now, this screenshot, I mean, it's an Excel worksheet. We try to summarize the resources that Makerere University Business School has access to. But we access more than these 12 or 13 resources that we have here. We access more than these. How? In the different collaborations that we have as a university. Previously, if you can see, we have these are databases, and databases usually are publishers. Actually, most of the time, publishers develop databases. Most of the time, they develop database. So I'll use more of databases than publisher to refer to these resources. One of them is Emerald. I think most of us know what Emerald is. We have Terra and Francis. We have IEEE for those doing computing and engineering and so forth. We have EBSCOhost, and those are some of the, its coverage. We have Wiley, we have GStar, we have Chicago, Jan Online, we have Sage, we have Oxford Online, we have, this is more for those who are doing sciences. It's provided by the World Health Organization for the third world countries. Then we have Oxford Scholarship Online for ebooks, mostly in economics and finance. We have EBSCOhost ebooks, and so on and so forth. How do we access these databases? Databases usually have links of this kind because we are in a an IT or computing era where everything you want can only be accessed online. I don't know how Professor used for them when they were studying used to access these things, but I got to know of these resources when they are online. I don't know what Professor used, but I think they used to use hard copies of books. But for now, each and everything that we do for us, it's online. When you want to access Emerald as a database, you have to use its you have to use this URL and go to your browser, type it there, then you enter, you'll find it there, and then you start searching for your databases. You start searching for the resource. You enter your variables within the dialog box that it gives you, and then you search for what you want, read it through, and then pick out what you want and what you don't want, and leave what you don't want. But I'm not going to take you through how we access each and every database, because it's something old, that whenever you wanted to get an article, you had to move through all these 13. When you're looking for one article, I don't know whether my point is clear. What I'm trying to say is, previously, if you wanted an article, you had to go a database per database looking for a given article. But now we have a system which helps us discover all the resources that we need, which are embedded within this system or published within these databases, and then it brings them within it brings it in one dialog box or within one interface. What I'm trying to mean is, the host is that screen? Okay, this is the, yep, perfect. Hope all of us are seeing a system called MyLuft.
Yeah, we are seeing it.
Yes, you can see it.
Oh, thank you. And now this system is a discovery tool that helps us discover all the resources that we have or we subscribe to, and those that we subscribe to through the collaborations that we have as a university, and brings all the results within one dialog box here, within one interface. to be a bit more clear on that, let me first make let me make a search here. I'm going to use a default search. So you see energy transitional communication. That's a search I made earlier in the day. Now, this system will give you results here. You see? It's giving me 523 results. 500, and they are both articles and database, articles, journal articles and books, just within a single search. And you can access 95% of these results here. Now, that exemplifies the fact that the resources that we have can be accessed within this system easily. And that was the intention behind us bringing this system on board.
Excuse me, Professor.
Yes, please.
Maybe you may ask, there are a number of people, we're getting a feedback in your presentation.
Hello.
I think we have handled it. There are some people who don't want to mute. I have muted them. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Professor. I'm assuming people are following me, but as I said, this is an introduction. You'll better get this explanation and this system when you approach me, or when we arrange and meet physically, and we make we do practicals, or I train you individually. You understand and appreciate this system. Now, when you go back here, you will see that some of these results come from different databases. When you look at this comes from Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy. And you find that it's a collaboration, that through our collaboration we can get that. Then you can see this one comes from Taylor and Francis. You can see this one comes from Directorate of Open Access Journal. You can see US Energy. We can do another page. You can see, yeah, this one, Taylor and Francis. Taylor and Francis, the provider. So this shows you that the system can give you results from all these, the database that we subscribe to. Now, now going back here, this system, I think starting this week, we'll not be seeing this consortium of Uganda University Libraries. We'll be seeing Makerere University Business School. Why? Because we didn't have an account, but we now have an account, which is being set up, and specifically whatever will be coming up, we'll be seeing it. I mean, will be purely managed within MOBS. And this is also all this is aimed at making our students comfortable while at MOBS. Now, second thing to show you about the system is that within it, it has other resource discovery tools. Because we wanted to make it a bit more stronger and more powerful in its searches, we added in other discovery tools like Google. All of us know that Google is the most powerful discovery tool in the world. Though I will add you as PhD student, I wouldn't advise you to use Google because it's not scholarly. It's a general, it does general searches, and you don't have that time or search by use of Google. But we will use Google Scholar. It's also one of the systems that you can use to search this system, because equally you are more familiar with with Google Scholar. That's why you put it there. But we have more systems that are designed by databases, and they are purely for that type of business. Now we are going to try out. The first one was LibHub. You can see here. I selected there. You click on that drop down button, and then you can select which discovery tool do you want this system to use to bring you, to give you results. Now I've already tried this and got these results. So I want to try out Google Scholar and see how it will also, the type of results it will give us. The bit about this system again is that when you click here and when you enter or click or search, it will always bring you results. It opens another tab, not to disorganize what your searches what your searches are. Now these are the results that it's giving us by use of Google Scholar. You found out that where you find this icon shows that it's purely this article can be given to you. You can get it in our it's powered by our system. That's why it's giving you this. And what Google Scholar gives you, usually it is 80% accessed within. The result comes from all the databases that we subscribe. Usually 80% of the results come from within the databases that we subscribe to. And these are some of the results, as I said earlier. You can access them. Just go to PDF and download an article and make use of it. The other thing I will tell you is I'll share my contacts so that you make use of me when you have issues like an article that has not been an article that you have failed to receive. I mean, you failed to download, that you do not have access to. You write to me. We have a fund somewhere that can give us access to some of them. The only thing is that you have to give me a bit of time, like 3 or 4 or 5 days, so that we process and then through our document delivery services, and we provide it to you. The other thing I would want to tell you is that we are always, I think I'm available 18 hours a day through email, and I'm available for like 16 hours on phone. And we do all that to serve you better. We don't want you to lack. We don't want you to have any issues when you're studying. We want you to do your research smoothly. Professor, I think for an introduction, this is enough.
Thank you very much, Hassan. And you have a number of questions. Some questions are in the chat room. Please pick those questions in the chat room, and then we shall have also an open question and answer session after this.
Okay, thanks, Professor, and thanks for your time. Now, you want me to answer them, Professor, right now?
Yes, there is a question, for example. If I could read it for you. What happens when the system asks for the institution? I'm not seeing MOOCs. That is from Rochelle.
Okay, Rochelle, to answer Rochelle, when the system asks for an institution to put their consortium of Uganda University Libraries, it seems Rochelle is already registered because she wouldn't ask such a question. I must have registered her. So kindly select consortium of Uganda University Libraries. Maybe to justify that, we did not have an account. We had just been through our collaboration. They subscribed to that to this system, Myloft. Now, since when we saw that it is good, we requested the school to make a subscription to this resource. Now we've bought more 5,000 accounts. We previously had 1,000, which were all taken up, which were, of course, we reserved some few, like 30 for eventualities, but today they gave us the money. They paid the money for those accounts. So kindly, through your coordinator, I would love to receive your emails, or you can write to me directly. I'm going to put my email there. You write to me so that we create for your accounts, and then we equally arrange on how to go, to practically use this system. Professor, hope I've answered Michelle.
There's another question.
Yes, Professor.
They want you to share your email and contacts. If you could do that in the chat room, that would be very good. But there's another question. How do I get credentials?
You write, yeah. You can get credentials through contacting me. You write to me an email and then tell me exactly what you want. It would even be very beautiful if you give me your MOOC's email, your school email. It would be better. But if you don't have an email, I don't think we have any student who doesn't have an email. The school email would be so good for us for management purposes.
Okay, there's another one. Can we access the databases indicating IP, like those restricted when accessed via Google?
Oh, thank you, sir. I'll answer that question the other way around. I'll say, one thing I didn't tell you is this system is equally a remote access system. When I create for you an account, even if you are in the US, you just log in and then read as if you are in Uganda. Certainly, it is accessible. It's no longer, actually, the IP recognition was earlier. That's what we used to use before the coming of this system. Now, the system, if you have an account and I've created for you an account, you will be able to access all the resources the way I've been accessing them. Actually, I'm not also at campus. I'm somewhere in town, but I've just switched on my router and I'm accessing these resources this way. Professor, I hope I've answered that question. Any other question?
Okay, thank you very much. Members, if you have a question, just raise your hand or unmute and speak.
Thank you, Hassan.
Okay.
You're welcome, Professor.
This is Sebuyongo Jeff.
Yes, Jeff.
Now, I think we shall need a physical class because there are a lot of things we are missing. And if you can organize for us some time and we meet physically and we go through all this.
Sebuyongo, it is you and your class to organize and look for him. He will come and talk to you. Do you have anything else other than that? Organize through your class president and you look for them. They are available and they are actually they are committed to serving your needs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have another person with a question? Others we might miss. Yeah? Aziz, you have a question?
Aziz is appreciating.
Okay. Nakirija Flavia.
I don't have a question, Prof.
Nakirija Flavia. Kirija is disappearing in the cyberspace. Oh my. Maybe you can type your question. Any other person? One more person? Right, Hassan, it appears to me as if members are really satisfied with the introductory information that you provided. Most of us spend a lot of time on the computer. I think all students here are aware of Google Scholar as the starting point, and that's what we have been emphasizing. And then from there, of course, some of the articles can be accessed while others cannot be accessed. Some of us are lucky that we can access over 99.9% of the articles without even coming to your office and without even having an account. But I want to emphasize this to the students. I think you need these resources. When I ask you to go and download journal articles, I don't want excuses. I want you to go and pick the journal articles. This business of saying that nothing has been written about this area can be annoying. There's a lot that has been done, right? And I think for Florence, last time I recall, she told me that there are no journal articles on energy transition communication. However, when she attended our lecture, last week's lecture, and I asked Elasto to illustrate a few things, and he used the exact example of energy transition communication because he's also doing his PhD in that area. I think they were able to locate over 500 hits on the internet using Google Scholar. And some were available in the various databases. And Florence later on gave a testimony when she met me in the office that she was actually able to see more than 600 later on. So I think she had problems of searching on the internet, but I'm happy that we now know what we are supposed to be doing. Right, I think, let me first cross-check here in the chat room because I see some questions, some write-ups here, but I think they are all appreciating Hassan. Thank you very much for coming
welcome, Professor.
And talking to the students. Please arrange and meet those PhD students. But for me, the PhD students, I usually tell them that they are the ones to look for the facilitators. They are no longer undergraduate or diploma students, not even masters. And you should manage your own learning and your own PhD. So look for these people and the resources wherever they are. Even when it means really paying for the resources, sometimes you may have to pay, right? But I know within universities, there are facilities, loan facilities, and I think they are called the inter-university loan facilities. So if an article is not available at MOOCs and is available at, let's say, Sterling University or Harvard University, if you go through the librarian, there's a way they will pick that particular journal article or even book, and you read it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
Hassan.
Professor.
Yes, I think now we can, if you can unshare and then we go back. You are, by the way, free to attend the lecture if you so wish. But if you have other pressing engagements, feel free to exit. Thank you very much.
I'll first get an admission for PhD, then I'll attend the class. But now that I don't have, I will take my leave. Thank you so much, Professor, and I appreciate always when you call me and I share what we have. We appreciate. I don't take it for granted. Have a nice evening.
Sorry, sir. Dr. Hassan, could you check your email? I just sent the email just now.
The email is there in the chat.
I've sent you an email just now, sir. Sorry.
That is Frank?
You know, it's Petros from Zambia. I've sent you an email.
Oh, okay. So I'll respond to it, Professor.
from Zambia.
Okay,
let me
that's
see.
fine. I think since now you have his contact, you can always communicate. After
Yes,
all,
thank you so much.
he has given you. It shouldn't actually eat into our time. You
Yeah.
can now
Thank you so
communicate.
much. And bye-bye. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think that was a useful introductory lecture to the things that we did discuss last week. I just want to cross-check and find out whether my colleague, Mr. Elasu, is around. Mr. Elasu, can you talk to your colleagues for a second or minutes before I come in?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. I'm available. I'm online, and was very attentive as Hassan was sharing. I notice, when you want books are very problematic to get, and I was very excited to hear Hassan tell us that there is opportunity at the university library. You may escape and pick the journals without going to the library, but when it comes to books, it's a little bit difficult. And I think I want to urge you, all my brothers and sisters here, to take advantage of that resource and go for it. Because, when at some point when you start trying to look at different theories are usually presented in books, and it becomes very difficult to get books freely online. But if there is such opportunity, I really encourage that we all get in touch with Hassan, myself inclusive, and we get this resource. For now, Professor, allow me hand back the microphone to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, my friend, Mr. Elasu, for those few remarks. Right, we just want to continue with our lecture. And please, if at any given moment you discover that you are not following, feel free to stop me. I'll be more than happy to respond. Now, today, since I'm using one gadget and I'm not using two computers, most likely, and I'm really in a PowerPoint mode, most likely I may not see your hand. So just unmute and speak, but do not forget to mute so that we avoid that echo that usually comes in the background there. Right, just to remind you, yes, we started our discussions around systematic literature review, and that is the outline that we are following. So we started with number one and we went through it. We found out what literature review is all about. And we defined literature review in terms of the surveys which relate to the available books, the available scholarly articles, and any other sources that are relevant to an issue that you are interested in investigating, right? And I gave you reasons why we need to undertake a literature review. And of course, they were in terms of the importance of literature, of what we call good literature review, right? And then after that, we went through the purpose of a literature review. And after that, we looked at typology of reviews. And under typology of reviews, I remember telling you that it's always important to think of knowledge in a given field, right, as consisting three major layers, if you recall. I gave you the first layer, which was actually relating to the primary studies that researchers conduct and publish. And that is the first layer. So when you start talking about knowledge, you are really talking about those three layers and the publications that exist in that form. So that's why when you go to the internet, like what Hassan has been taking us through, the various journals, you'll find the primary studies that have been conducted by researchers and published in incredible publication outlets. Of course, you also have open source, and then you have others where you can't easily access, right? Like especially the ones that Hassan has been talking about. Then I talked about the second layer, which refers to the reviews of those particular studies that summarize and attempt to offer new interpretations, which are built from and often extending beyond the primary studies. And in most cases, I think that's where you'll find the various types of reviews that we talked about last time, like the systematic, right? And then you have state of the art. Then you have methodological reviews. Then you have theoretical reviews and so forth. So you find that there are those scholars who pick journal articles that talk about a particular area, right, and attempt to review, right? In other words, they take those studies as data, right, and they attempt to summarize and then later on provide directions for future research. And that's where you should be operating. So that's the second layer of knowledge, right? These relate to reviews of studies that summarize and offer new interpretations to the available body of knowledge. The third category, if you remember, we called them perceptions, conclusions, opinions, and interpretations that are usually shared informally. So when people read those systematic papers and meta-analytic reviews, they also form opinions and they form perceptions and conclusions about what exists. So they also come up with the other write-ups that you will quite often find on the internet, and these are worth reading, right? And actually most of them fall under the category of the state of the art research. So those papers are worth reading and they are worth interpreting. So that is the third category. And I told you that when you are composing your literature review, right, in most cases, it is important to note that the third layer, right, of knowledge is always cited as true, right? Even if we are really aware that it has loose relationship to the primary studies and even the secondary literature. So usually when these people offer their opinions about research in a particular area and also provide the conclusions, scholars usually jump onto those conclusions and opinion, and they take that to be the true knowledge in that display. So those are the three major aspects that have to be considered when we are talking about typology of reviews, and they fall under that's the knowledge domain. Right, now, types of literature reviews, as we saw last time, let me just take you there briefly. We saw that we have a number of studies, right? A number of reviews So we've got a category that we call argumentative literature review, and I'll not really go through these ones because I covered them in the previous lecture. For those who missed, you may wish to go to the YouTube and pick that lecture, right? So we've got the argumentative review, and we also had integrative literature reviews. Then we had historical review. We had methodological reviews, if you still recall, right? Maybe I'll talk about methodological and theoretical reviews briefly, because these need to be conducted by students, especially when they want to undertake research in a particular area or field, right? And when we talk about methodological review, right, we do not really focus on the findings that you'll find in the journal articles, but how, right, those scholars came about saying what they said, right, or what they discovered. And that is really the method of analysis. So here we review methods of analysis, and methods of analysis in this case provide a framework of understanding at the various levels, like level of a theory, what you would call substantive fields, research approaches, data collection and analysis techniques, right? So it provides a framework for understanding these things that I've just given you, and more so how researchers draw upon a wide variety of knowledge, ranging from the conceptual level to practical documents for use in the in fieldwork in various areas, which I did talk about last time, like philosophical areas, that is really ontological and epistemological considerations, whether you are talking about quantitative and qualitative integration, sampling, interviewing, data collection, data analysis. I'm sure you are very familiar with those aspects. So methodological review papers attempt to examine, right, methods or methodologies that have been adopted by researchers in a particular area, right? And you can also make a contribution in that area by adopting something that possibly scholars have not adopted before, or probably even integrating some of the methodologies in that case. Now, the other one is a theoretical review, and I know that you will need theoretical reviews. I know I took some time last week talking about it, but in this case, the purpose of this form of review is to examine the body of theory that has accumulated in regard to an issue or probably a concept or a phenomenon that you want to investigate. If, for example, you are interested in poverty, right? That is your subject, or that is your topic for your area. Then you must review, right, theories of poverty, right? And these theories could range from the ones that Amartya Sen talks about, which relates to really communities coming out of a certain state to another state, right? When he talks about the capability theory, right? It could also take on other forms like the psychological perspectives. You know, some scholars believe that poverty is in the mind, right? And it has psychological perspectives. So you've got psychological theories, some of which are in the area of cognitive science, right? So it's quite important for you to know what we call the perspectives and the philosophies and the paradigms that scholars have used. And in this case, you'll be reviewing theories, and you can actually contribute to a field by coming up with a perspective, right? Or a philosophy that researchers have not really thought about, but in your view, you really believe that that could be useful. So those are the some of the things that you need to understand and some of the reviews. So I think, as you can see on the screen here, you can always add literature review, integrative literature review, historical literature review, methodological literature review, theoretical literature review, meta-analytic literature review, scoping literature review, state-of-the-art literature review, umbrella literature review, and systematic literature review. And that's where my concern is, right? And I did introduce systematic literature review for those who attended our lecture last week, right? And I told you that we call it systematic literature review because there is a methodology, right? So when we say systematic review, there's a word systematic. So the word systematic is also known as structured. Systematic literature review, or what we call structured literature review, right? And of course, as we saw last week, systematic literature review was originally in the natural sciences, more so in the medical field, trying to accumulate research that has been done over time. In other words, you review a synthesis of those studies with an objective of aiding policy in a certain area. If you're talking about development of vaccines or treatment of a particular disease, right? So you get those scientific studies and then you provide guidance in terms of policy formulation. And I think last week I did give you an example of a policy document that was sent to me. It was certainly relating to vaccines, right? And I was one of the reviewers for that document. So you don't have to be an expert in the area of medicine to do a systematic literature review and to know that somebody is doing the right thing. As long as you know how to go on the database, pick the information, the most important thing that you have to do is to do a lot of reading, right? So that you understand what is happening in that area. But if you discover that the area is confusing, never force yourself in that area because you'll not be able to do a good job. So this systematic literature review, which was originally in the natural sciences, entered management research really as a promising methodology for reviewing previous literature so that they bring the field closer together, right? And if you do a good job and you come up with a high quality systematic literature reviews, then you'll be able to support better decisions for policymakers, for managers, and of course, even entrepreneurs, like in the area of vaccines. Now we find so many systematic literature review papers. And incidentally, the job that you have to do here is not very small because people have published, like now in the area of vaccines, you've got millions and millions of hits now, right? If you talk about COVID-19, so many, and you can imagine all those publications have come up within a period of around 4 years, from 2019, 2020, 21, 22, and 23, and many other studies are being really published in that area. So, of course, due to the rapidly growing popularity of this methodology, right, within the overall business domain or management domain, then systematic literature review is receiving more attention, right? And of course, the papers that were published some time back have created rules and suggestions on how to conduct such review articles in the field. So there's a lot of work that is being done in that area, and the rules are being crafted, but of course borrowing from natural sciences, especially medical field. Of course, as you can see, this systematic literature review is becoming increasingly popular, almost to the extent of replacing traditional review, right? What we call the individual review papers in the area of business and management. And this is what most PhD students have been doing. You go to the internet, in a biased fashion or manner, you pull around 10 journal articles if you are lazy and you don't want to read a lot, or even 5. And if you find a supervisor who is bold enough to tell you to download 100 journal articles, you feel so bad and you start fighting him, and you may even change supervisors. You run away from them, from that fellow, and you go to other supervisors whom you think are very, very easy, and they are not disturbing, they're not giving you a hard time. But in the actual sense, you'll be losing out. So even after compiling your PhD dissertation and you go for examination, the whole process is mechanical. You don't even understand anything about the subject area. And I think that's why you find so many people fighting very hard. They'll find those who have read, and they have even transcended boundaries, knowledge boundaries, right? They will be fought by individual members in that area. For example, if you are in the area of finance and you are lazy and you are not reading, you've not done any systematic literature review, and you find somebody who is coming from, let's say, development economics or even entrepreneurship, who has downloaded, let's say, 600 journal articles in the area of finance. Let's say you are talking about hedging. And the fellow will be having more knowledge and will be more competent and more prepared to answer any question in the area of hedging than actually somebody who has a bachelor's degree in finance, master's degree, and even a PhD in finance, but he has never done a systematic literature review. So he has no idea. He only reads a few things. He becomes a net consumer of knowledge. That means he cannot even develop critical analytical skills because what he knows is very little in that particular area. So that's why now systematic literature review is becoming increasingly popular, almost replacing the traditional literature review that doesn't have any methodology, right? Now, the main advantage of systematic literature review is actually in the aspect of transparency in data collection and synthesis of results, because what we do with the systematic literature review, we have a methodology section, right? So we go through the various methods so that if I follow that methodology and I arrive at around 900 journal articles, and they're the ones I finally select and read. So if you follow the same methodology that I have articulated, to have written or described, you'll be able to also arrive at 900 journal articles, and you'll be able to read and arrive at more or less similar conclusions to the ones I have or I would have arrived at. So that's why, and that's how important this systematic literature review is. There is transparency in data collection because you are able to document the methodology. There's transparency in the synthesis, right? And there's higher level objectivity and reproducibility. In other words, you are able to reproduce, or other scholars will be able to reproduce these studies. Now, when you talk about traditional literature reviews, right, we basically mean non-structured, right, or what you call the non-systematic right, or non-transparent reviews. So traditional literature is really not transparent. So non-transparent is non-systematic and non-structured. So there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into it, right? In data collection, there's subjectivity. In data interpretation, there's subjectivity, right? And that's why it's quite important for us to know that, right? So what I'm going to do now is to probably take you to a table. I hope you are seeing that table where you'll be able to see the difference, right, between traditional or what we call subjective or non-systematic literature review and the structured review, which is systematic literature review, right? And the comparison here is made along a number of aspects like identification for the need for a review, right? When you go to systematic literature review, there is always a need for undertaking that review. And we also come up with objectives, right? Like in a study, you have objectives of study, you have research questions, you have hypotheses, you have propositions if you're undertaking a primary study or research. Now, in the systematic literature review, we also have what we call objectives and research questions. So, and that gives us actually the need for a review, right? And Joseph Elasu will be taking you through this and using an example of some of the studies that we have done together, right? And of course, for traditional literature review, you discover that traditional reviews are part of nearly every publication, but the need is not as pressing, right? And even when you tell people that, you know, the literature review section, right, somehow must mirror the background, right, and related to the statement of the problem and the conceptual framework, people will not understand what we are talking about. So many of you have attended, for example, vivas, PhD vivas. You may have seen one of the opponents, and I think it's not really, it wasn't done a long time ago, but you may have had one of the opponents asking questions like, what is the purpose of literature review, right? He wants to see whether the student can understand that within the literature review, you actually critique the available works, right? And that you do that systematically so that you are able to identify a research gap or research gaps, right, that relate to the hypothesis or research questions or propositions that you are addressing. So in other words, every section of your literature review, right, must end up with a hypothesis or a proposition or answer a research question somewhere, or not even answering, but present a research question at the end, right? So that requires a lot of reading and synthesis and discussion. And that's why I told you that after you've read literature, you must construct literature, right? And I gave you 3 ways of constructing literature, if you recall, right? And I told you can use progressive coherence for those who attended last time. I told you can have a synthesized coherence, or you can use what you call non-coherence, right? So that means you should even pay attention to the way you construct that literature and the way you discuss the literature. Actually, if somebody does a very good job in the literature review section, when you read that section, you don't want to leave it. And in fact, you'll be seeing hypotheses that will mirror the conceptual framework that the person will be having. And you'll be able to see that major research gap presented in the introduction chapter, either in the background to the study or introduction or probably a section for the statement of the problem, depending on the structure that the university is following. So as you can see, there's always a need for undertaking literature review, right? Now, of course, the second aspect is in terms of developing or development of a review protocol, right? So you can see under systematic literature review, you must develop a protocol, right? And that protocol is very important for objectivity, for transparency, right? So that's why all those things will be documented. Every step is documented, and the number of activities that you must undertake. Again, Elasu will be taking us through this using either the PICOS or probably another approach that we use to do that. Now, in the traditional literature review, this is not really common, right? You may not have a review protocol, right? Now, in terms of identification of research or even journal articles that you are going to read, under systematic literature review, it is structured, it is a replicable and transparent process. Under traditional, it is subjective. In terms of evaluating studies, again, for systematic, it is transparent because we have a transparent protocol of studies that we eliminate, including the gray literature. If you really discover that you don't need gray literature, but sometimes you may need gray literature. So that is something that we shall discuss later on so that we understand what gray literature is all about. Now, under traditional review, when it comes to evaluating studies, the author takes the literature that helps to support their hypothesis or the arguments, that's all. Right, so there's a lot of bias that goes into that. Now, under systematic literature review, when you are conducting data extraction, right, data extraction is driven by a general protocol, right? We also have some structures that we follow. And we also have, for example, some Excel guidelines or sheets that we use, and even some software packages that we can use to do this. Right, now, when it comes to traditional literature, it's actually driven by intuition of the authors, right? And you may not even, I mean, that inspiration comes to an individual called the X, and you may not really have the same inspiration flowing to another person, Y or Z, right? So when it comes to conducting data synthesis, it is largely concept driven, and it is a central part of a systematic literature review. And under traditional literature, that is not necessary. It only resembles a summary of existing literature, really, when you read the works. So the reasons are there for systematic literature review, because it can become a standalone paper, and it actually creates evidence, right? And answers to some research questions. So it is very, very important for us to know that the paper can be standalone. You can even use the same paper to write your proposal if you so wish. And for some of you who attended last week's lecture, I told you that you can also come up with what we call a theory building paper, right, using that systematic literature review. So if you so wish, you can actually publish around 3 papers out of it. One, you are able to produce a standalone systematic literature review paper that you publish. 2, you can get a proposal out of it. And 3, from a proposal, you can actually come up with a theory building paper, again, that you can publish. Now, for traditional literature, right, in this case, really, the reasons, as we know, is to set a literature foundation for an upcoming empirical research project, right? Or probably a paper that somebody wants to publish, right? Now, when it comes to costs, in terms of time, in terms of labor, systematic literature review is very time consuming. Now, the other traditional one is not really a very big issue in this case. It is less time consuming, and it's something that you can do within a short while. So as you can see, I've already told you that most of the studies in which use traditional literature review, they are not really systematic, right, by their very nature, and they follow a narrative rather than a transparent methodology. And such reviews are therefore termed as unscientific because of their use of unrepresentative samples and unsystematic procedures that are being followed in undertaking such studies. So that is what is done most of the time without really going into debates on that's an overview of the systematic and unsystematic literature review, right? So what I'm going to do before I get into this slide of the aims of systematic literature review, I just want to say that I think now we can define systematic literature review succinctly before we get to this level of telling you why we probably need it in terms of the aims. So we can easily define from the things that we've been discussing here in the last few minutes, we can define systematic literature review really as a review of an existing body of literature that follows a transparent and reproducible methodology in searching for the journal articles, assessing the quality of the journal articles, synthesizing, right, the knowledge or the information presented with a high level of objectivity. And I think this is what we've been discussing, and this comparison between systematic and traditional literature review, right? So that is very important. But now I think what we need to do, let me give you the aims before I take you to the process of writing a systematic literature review. Right, now, the aims of systematic literature review are highlighted, as you can see on the slide, and I don't want to reduce so to spend too much time discussing this, right? But as I've already indicated, for systematic literature review, you'll always have an objective. The objectives must be there. And I'll tell you what I usually ask my students to do when they are developing the objectives of the systematic literature review, right? And I give them guidance along these lines because I believe that is what they need at that time, because to me, the systematic literature review paper must be transformed into a proposal later on, so that you achieve two things. One, you are able to publish a paper. And for you who are doing your PhDs at Makerere University, you know very well that you must publish 2 journal articles in refereed journals. So meaning that one of the papers you will be able to publish even before you write your proposal is a systematic literature review. And then from a systematic literature review, you can now start thinking about writing a proposal and presenting it. So after presenting your proposal, I usually advise the students to write what I call a theory building paper that is published or publishable, right? And if you can do it and publish it, those will be 2 papers. You'll only be left with a dissertation to graduate. But I usually give them an extra exercise of publishing a 3rd paper that comes from your findings, right? After collecting data from the field, you probably publish, especially if you take the primary data collection approach, right? Then you publish 1 paper that relate to validity and liability, right, of the instrument. So validation. So you can publish that paper in a psychometric paper or journal, psychometric journal, or probably econometric journal. That can also do, but you'll be presenting really models and probably methodology related issues, right, and validation of your results. So the questions probably that you have to think about at this level, the conceptual questions, right? I usually ask students to conceptualize, right, those aspects, and then thereafter, I ask them to think about the paradigms, the philosophical orientations, the theories that scholars have used in studying that particular field or discipline, and also to attempt a critique of those paradigms and philosophical orientations. And that can form your second objective, right? And the third objective, you go into what we call the predictors, right? And of course, once you do that job very well, you are able to establish directions for future research. And once you articulate that section very well, then that section will form a major part of your introduction chapter or background to the study, right? And then move into that direction. So that's where we are. The aims, one, address a specific research question or questions. Then to search for or locate and collect results, then reduce bias, appraise the quality of research, then synthesis. You must synthesize results, right? And then make the knowledge base accessible. And that's why we're talking about directions for future research. Identify the research gaps, propose a future research agenda, enable critical appraisal and replication. So those are some of the things in a summary or the aims of undertaking a systematic literature review. So you actually need it, and every student needs to do that kind of review. Right, so having said that, I can take you through briefly the process of writing a systematic literature review in any area. It could be in business, it could be in entrepreneurship, it could be in energy economics, anywhere, right? The process, what process do you follow, right, in writing a systematic literature review? And I'll give you an introduction to this, and before we go into actual stages, that if you attempt to read about systematic literature reviews, you discover that several authors have attempted to present a model for different stages of a systematic literature review, right? And when my colleague comes in, Mr. Lasso, he should be able to show you some of the models, right? And the stages followed in a systematic literature review. For example, one of the scholars called Transfield, he proposes around 10 steps, right, which are contained in the 5 stages, right? As you can see, those are similar to what I have on the screen here. Stage 1, right? Stage 1, you see you have 2 steps, right? Stage 2, you also have 2 steps. Stage 3, you also have 2 steps. Stage 4, you also have 2 steps, and stage 5. So Transfield proposes around 10 steps in 5 stages. Then you have other scholars like Frank and Hattak. They attempt to split those stages or steps into 6 steps. and they even reduce on the steps, right? So they recommend 6 steps with the possibly 1 step in each, yes, 1 step in each stage, right? Then you have other scholars like Okoli, right, who conducted studies in the early, actually late 2010s, around 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And he attempted to explain 4 steps. And of course, other scholars like Pitway, they have actually compressed that into 3 steps. So in other words, again, as I have been emphasizing, as scholars, you need to read so that you don't have, so that you don't cram these things. Otherwise, somebody will tell you how many steps, and then you must say 10. You forget that there are other scholars who have reduced this into around 5 stages, where 5 steps with the reduced stages, that kind of thing. So stages have been reducing and increasing depending on the scholars. Some have 3, others 4, others 5. I mean stages, and the steps in each stage have also been reducing or even increasing, depending on the scholars, as you can see. So that is very important for us to note. But I'll take you through what I consider to be the main steps, right? Right, as you can see, there we have around 4 stages, right? And the first one is what we call planning the review, right? You must plan the review. And I think you can see what you have under that. Then stage 2, identifying and evaluating studies. 3, extracting and synthesizing data. And 4, disseminating the review findings. So what I'm going to do now is to discuss each of these stages, starting with stage number 1, which is actually planning the review, right? Now, since as we said earlier on from the previous table, I don't know whether we can see it now here. If you look at, for example, column 1, right, around row 1, 2, 3, right? Row 3 tells you that you must develop, for example, a review protocol, right? And while actually row 2 talks about identification for the need for a review. All these are part of planning, right? So as you can see, a good systematic review, right, can be planned well, right, and can result into a publication of what we call a standalone paper, and therefore it should be considered as such if you want to get a publication out of it. And even the questions will be a little bit different, right, from those that you'll pose, especially if you are interested in transforming it into a proposal and also having a paper published, right? But as you can also see, this systematic literature review, it can be part of a larger research project, right? Especially for those students who are undertaking their PhDs by research and publication, right? Where you have, let's say, chapter 2 or chapter 1, right, where you have one particular objective or 2 particular objectives. You have a different introduction, right? You have a separate introduction, you have the literature review, you have methodology, you've got results and so forth, right? So that will be chapter 1. Then chapter 2, it will be another hypothesis, right? Another research question, and chapter 3. Then later on, you bring these things together into a dissertation. Incidentally, for some of you undertaking your studies at Makerere University, you can actually do this and successfully graduate and defend your research. So it is not a taboo for you to produce such type of PhD. You just need a doctoral committee that understands the rules and regulations and the types of PhDs that Makerere University requires students to undertake and graduate, right? So I would like to see, especially after the likes of Vincent and Sylvia, I would like to see now students who take this direction, right? And for me, I'm prepared to take on a few that can actually now do their PhDs by publications. And I think it is very, very possible, and you will successfully graduate, and we shall defend you wherever you'll be. Right, so systematic literature review can be part of a larger research project, so that you now have several activities being done at every level. And for each of those papers, you have a systematic literature review transformed into what you call an empirical study, right? That will form a chapter in your work, right? So this literature review, systematic literature review, it will help you identify further, right, further areas for investigation, and it will help you spot, right, those important areas that you need to research on and also seek answers to, right? So and that is still under planning your review. So, and that is very, very important, right? So of course, as you can see, this is very important, especially at that planning stage. But in both cases, it is important that the literature review is executed in a professional manner, right? And you executing this in a professional manner requires you to plan for this research. And that's why in this section of planning the review, we've got two major components, one being identifying the need, and two, developing the protocol. Now under identifying the need, right, that is usually the first step. Authors must always identify if there is a need for a systematic literature review, as you have already seen in this table, where we differentiated systematic literature reviews from traditional literature reviews. So is there a need? For example, if you are researching on a topic, right? Let's say you are dealing with the commercialization of biomass, whatever it is, or you are dealing with the work identification, right, or identity in this case, and you discover that many studies have been undertaken in that area, and the last systematic literature review was done in 2020 or 2021. Since then, you've got very few journal articles. So why should you now undertake a systematic literature review? It's not necessary. You just need to pick that systematic literature review or meta-analysis, interpret, read it, critique it, interpret what is there, and then pick the ideas to construct your own study, because even the directions for future research are indicated in that paper that you are reading. So it's important for you to identify if there is a need for systematic literature review. They sent me a paper for review. It was a systematic review paper. Later on, I will be talking about bibliographic or right? Graphic papers as well, which are published, right? But today, we are talking about systematic. Now, when they sent me a paper, right, and this paper was a systematic review paper, and the fellow had really wasted, what should I say, time reviewing, thinking that the paper will be published. And for that journal, I am an associate editor. So the paper landed on my table, right? I went through the paper. I saw that the paper had actually reviewed 4 journal articles, right? So I had a discussion with the editor. You know, I'm the associate editor for that journal. And I told the editor that it is not worth sending for review. For me, I wanted to give it a desk reject. And the editor insisted and said, well, let's send it and see what the scholars will say in that area. But I told the editor that we are wasting time for the reviewers. So this paper is not worth reviewing. After all, I'd wasted also some good time reading it. So when he insisted, I said, fine, let's send it. We got 3 anonymous reviewers. I sent the paper to them, and the fellows actually refused to review the paper. Right, the reviewers simply wrote back, and they said that it does not meet the standards of the journal, and that is not acceptable to really review 4 papers. It said in terms of sampling, it doesn't make any sense methodologically, and therefore they didn't have time to waste reviewing such a paper. And all the 3 actually refused to review. So I sent the comments to the editor of the journal, and of course, that's it. So you must be very careful, and that's why it's important to deal with the issue of the need, identify the need for the review, right? And that is the first step, right? So, and that's why you need to be familiar with this thing called systematic literature review. So you need to check if there is already a systematic literature review covering the topic being published, or probably the one that you want to undertake in that area. And to do so, I suggest that you start with the literature searches on Google Scholar or potential databases that cover most of the literature in the area you are studying. If you are in finance, if you are in marketing, you are in energy economics, you are in entrepreneurship, right? Do that. And that's what Hassan has been taking us through, right? So you start with those literature searches. Then, of course, if there is already an existing review, you must decide if different questions can be asked that can be answered with your new research, right? Which will be generated by reviewing those papers, so that you don't pose the same questions. Now, if the existing research has been carried out badly, right, you can also suggest, right, to undertake step. But you begin by reviewing what already exists, so that you dismiss the research, the systematic literature review that exists in that case. So, but in this case, both situations will allow the author to think about writing new research, right? And of course, to answer those questions, you as the author has to be familiar with the methodology of systematic literature review. If you're not familiar with it, there isn't much we can actually take. Now, if the literature allows for further contributions, then you should take advantage of that, right, and undertake a systematic literature review. You can also create, for example, definitions of constructs that you are dealing with. If you're dealing with, for example, like my colleague Elas, who is working on energy transitions, right, you may find that there's no agreed upon definition of transitions, right? In which case now you can actually undertake a study just to deal with the only definitions, right? And you do a systematic literature review and come up with a robust definition. It could be an issue of conceptualization, right? Scholars are coming from different perspectives, right? World views when they are conceptualizing. So you can actually write a paper, a complete systematic literature review on the conceptualization. Another one could be on methodology, right? So it is very important that you go through those things, right? You come up with a synthesis, right? Or you try to synthesize the existing literature and highlight those important issues, and also point out what you may call irregular results if they are there, or special results, and of course dealing with so many other aspects that I've been talking about without really spending too much time. So I think for the identification of the need at the planning level, that is important, but my brother will be coming in with an example to illustrate some of these things. Before I open up the room for discussion, let me take you to the B, what we call developing a review protocol, right? Develop a review protocol. Don't simply read anyhow, right? You pick one journal article, another journal article. No, come up with a review protocol. And this is important because at the end of the day, you must ensure a transparent and high quality process, right? That must be followed by scholars who may wish to study or contribute knowledge in the area where you are contributing knowledge, right? So you must create a review protocol at the beginning. Don't simply remember this when you are halfway or you are about to complete your review, right? And in this case, the protocol is the basis for the research that you are undertaking. And this protocol will contain the whole process, right, that you are going to follow. And the protocol will also support the methodology of the review, right, that you are undertaking. So it's important that the protocol is spelled out at the beginning. And this protocol will outline the parameters for the data search, right? How are you going to search for the, and by the way, when I talk about data search, I mean searching the journal articles, right? Because these journal articles that have been published, they actually become data points. Just like when you're undertaking a primary survey and you say I have 290 respondents, I have 500 respondents, I have 1,000 cases or observations. In this case, the journal articles become your observations, they become your respondents in that case. And therefore, right, even when you are reporting, your N will be 291 or 500 or 800, depending on the journal articles that you generate and the journal articles that you review, right? So the protocol in this case will outline the parameters for the search, data search. And of course, you must have a comprehensive protocol. Now, a comprehensive protocol will deal with, for example, the search strings, just like Joseph was talking about them last time, right? And he also attempted to illustrate that. Today, if he has time, if we still have time, he will do it. But from the way I see things, I think he may have to do it possibly in our third lecture, not in this lecture. So the search strings have to be highlighted in the protocol. The databases, right, that you are going to approach, like the ones that Hassan has exposed us to, right? Those must be highlighted a little bit early. Then you must also get what we call the criteria for including or excluding literature. That is what we call the inclusion and exclusion criteria. All that is at the protocol level, right? And of course, for some of you who want to understand this concept of protocol, very well. I think I'll be sending you books. Today I didn't prepare them here, but possibly in our next lecture, I'll give you those books so that you actually go and read about developing protocols and the steps that we follow in systematic literature reviews, so that you understand the task of undertaking a systematic literature review, right? Right, but in this case, maybe again, some few warnings. It is really essential that you do not consider a review protocol to be set in stone. In other words, you must be willing to change, because new ideas come in, right? Either at the time when you start searching the databases, or probably when you use one search string, right? And it doesn't yield results, like my friend Florence was saying, there's nothing like energy transition communication, but later on to discover that she has over 600 journal articles. So in other words, you do not consider a review protocol to be set in stone, but rather that every change should be mentioned and protocoled whenever need arises, and that is very important. So it's important that you follow that, right? Again, several researchers in this area of systematic literature review and scholars, and also using our own experience, we do encourage writers, and we do encourage students and authors to search for all available literature, right? To search even the books, right? Conference papers and gray literature, right? And since the word gray literature is appearing maybe for the first time, I'm going to take about 2 minutes talking about gray literature. I would like to let you know that there is an ongoing debate which has not been settled yet about gray literature, whether we should actually include gray literature, right? So there is an ongoing discussion, right, about the use of gray literature, and gray literature include working papers, conference proceedings, right, and papers in that category, right? So the issue is whether these should be included in systematic literature review. Now, I'll just give you advice now, but later on I may tell you that yes, you can change this thinking a little bit. For the time being, I want to say that don't think about including gray literature, right, unless it is absolutely essential, right? So look for only published, right, peer-reviewed journals, right? And this can be checked through the academic process, right? And of course, there are so many scholars who will be guiding you on how you can actually pick these peer-reviewed journal articles in your areas, right? Because they will make your study stronger, right? And of course, once you do that job very well, you'll be able to pick results, right? I think let me pause here a little bit, right? But I'm pausing by reminding you that whenever you pick any journal article, do not simply download anyhow, although we are talking about a protocol that you must follow in identifying and picking published journal articles, right? But don't simply download anything because you have problems. So whenever you use either Google Scholar or any search string, begin by reading the abstract, right? Make sure that you read the abstracts of those papers, right, and understand them. If you see that there is a value, right, in including that paper, then you can go ahead and download it and even have a thorough look at that paper. So that is really step number 1, right? Let me pause at stage number 1 and give you an opportunity to to ask a question. Are you hearing me, by the way?
Professor.
Yes, Professor, we are listening.
Okay.
I'm getting you, Prof.
Okay, let's pause. Let's pause a little bit. Let's pause a little bit here. Odong, we are not hearing you. Odong James.
Yes, Professor, I'm getting you very well.
Okay. Anybody would wish to ask a question? I see somebody has raised his hand. Siraj Magala, please ask.
Yes, thank you, Prof. I had earlier posted something in the chat. I don't know whether you responded to it, and I didn't get it. On when you are telling us the different types of reviews that we may have to do, I was asking how many types could you consider for just one systematic review paper? Can you integrate like more than one in one paper, or it is one type of review per paper?
Okay, that's sorry, as you know, as you were discussing, power here fluctuated a little bit, and I thought I'd gone off. So I'm trying to put on another computer that does not necessarily need power, so that in case I get power challenges, I'm able to switch and utilize this other one. Right. Let me just, your question is straightforward. Those are what we call typology of reviews. Now, these are types of review, literature reviews, the argumentative literature review. You have the traditional literature review, integrative, a list of many, only that I didn't number them 1, 2, 3. And the last one that you see there is a systematic literature review. My concern in this presentation was actually to cover systematic literature review, but I wanted to let you know that there are other reviews as well, right? Like the theoretical, meta-analytic. For example, meta-analysis, right? They will try to look at studies that have been conducted over time using a meta-analytic software, right? They pick, for example, the regression coefficients and the correlation coefficients from the models, and they obtain what we call effect sizes, right? And at the end of the day, they will tell you that out of the 1,000 studies or 1 million studies conducted over the last 20 years, this is the status of research. And this is possibly the direction for future research. So that would be a meta-analytic review. Now, a meta-analytic review is totally different from a systematic literature review. Although most of the books that write about systematic literature review, they will talk about systematic literature review. In fact, even when Joseph will be talking about the structures that we follow, right? You'll find that some of the structures incorporate systematic literature reviews and meta-analytic reviews, but they are totally different. Scoping reviews are different, state of the art, totally different. But in the future, if you want us again to take a few minutes talking about each one of them and giving it a detailed coverage, we shall do so. But for purposes of this lecture and the previous lecture and the one that we shall have either this week or next week, we'll be talking about systematic literature review. Have I answered your question, Siraj?
Yes, Prof. Thank you so much.
Okay. There's somebody who's asking a question here. Dear Prof, would World Bank working papers fall under gray literature to avoid? You know, last time somebody asked a question, and I told her that, you know, one of the biggest problems we have is that the kind of training that we've received over the years is actually a bad one. We don't critique issues, we simply cram and reproduce. So because we cram and reproduce, there is no effort that is expended in thinking, right? So why am I making these statements? I'm making these statements to let you know that, you know, if you are writing a paper, right, and that paper is for scholars, and you have so many papers published in refereed journal articles, then you avoid those ones. However, if, for example, you are writing a policy paper or document, there's no way you are going to eliminate those papers. In fact, you may end up even eliminating the journal articles, right, and taking these papers. Now, some areas are just developing, right? Some areas are just coming up, and you'll discover that you even have very few publications, right, in such areas. So there's no way you're going to ignore great literature. So you may end up reviewing around 100 or 600 journal articles published by World Bank, if there is anything like that anyway, because they also have certain areas where they have interest, right? So in such situations, that's what you'll do, right? So I don't know whether I've answered your question, but again, you need to discuss with your supervisors, right? And we don't have really clear-cut answers for some of these things, right? In certain areas, using your common sense, you'll see that you don't need great literature. In some areas which are policy-oriented, policy papers in the area of economics, you may not do well with such publications. You may even go to the Ministry of Finance and pick journal articles. Okay, you can ask as I try to log into another machine because it is becoming horrible. It's windy this way and power may go off anytime. So any other person with a question as I try to log in on another machine, please go ahead and ask.
Professor, good evening to you.
Good evening, how are you?
I'm fine, Professor. Professor, my issue was I wanted you to shine more light on those PhDs that are attained by research only, by publishing something like that, Professor.
I think I will just, if just for purposes of maybe reducing on the time that we take on discussing these issues, I'll ask you to look at the PhD guidelines that Makerere University gives. In case you don't have, in case you don't have or you don't pick one, you can remind me and I send it to your mail. But you can pick it from GRC. It's one of those areas that is recommended. And if you have no challenges of following that procedure, you go ahead and follow it. If you have supervisors who are skeptical and they have problems with it, then you will not be able to do it because they don't like it. But if they don't have difficulties, then you must be able to do it. Have I answered your question? Maybe I've given you a vague answer.
No, Professor, it was actually satisfactory. I'm going to follow up, get the rest as you have said. I'm going to remind you for the email. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question? Please go ahead, speak.
Prof.
Yes,
Good
please.
Evening.
Good evening.
You made a statement that in systematic literature review, developing a protocol is essential for objectivity. So I just wanted to know, how does developing a protocol ensure objectivity? Yeah, that's my question.
When we talk about a protocol, we are more or less referring to a procedure that you are going to follow. It's like in the area of medicine. Let me first, like in the area of medicine, right? You will not be able to undertake any serious procedure, maybe an operation, without having a protocol, right? You must have one. So we are also saying that you must, under protocol, you really come up with those things that I have already mentioned, right? Maybe I can repeat a few of those things under protocol so that you understand exactly what we need, what we mean. For example, in your protocol, you have to establish the search strings. And that's what Elasu took us through last time if you attended the class. You must also determine the databases, right, that you are going to visit. I told you can start with Google Scholar, but you must go to databases, right? Then you must also come up with a criteria for including some journal articles and excluding some literature. Then you must also establish quality control or quality criteria and so forth, right? So all these must be established at the beginning. You must have a methodology. In fact, when Elasu starts illustrating this using some of the papers we have published, you will see a section for methodology. If you have a methodology, that means that you are objective. Your approach is systematic, right? So even a scholar who will come after you will be able to undertake a study in that area and they arrive at credible results, right, or conclusions. So that's why we talk about objectivity. It is objective in the sense that it is systematic, right? The protocol is detailed and we must follow it. For the other one is subjectivity, that you just pick journal articles anyhow, scattered over the internet. Some could be taken from psychology, others possibly they're taken from sociology, right? But because they have something to do with the finance, you may imagine that those are finance papers, they are grounded in finance, when the actual sense, you are just subjectively picking journal articles from anywhere. And you may even come up with a hypothesis thinking that it is credible, it makes sense and makes a contribution in your field of study, when in the actual sense, you are not contributing anything, right? You are just muddling through. And that's why I've always had difficulties with some of my colleagues who believe that when you are doing a PhD, it doesn't matter for you to articulate your contribution to a certain field of study. For them, they say, no, research is research, PhD is PhD, you're contributing anywhere. So you can even go to psychology, pick journal articles, go to mathematics, pick a few, then you go to physics, pick a few, then you go to energy, pick around one, etc. And then you have a study that doesn't reside anywhere. So even in interdisciplinary studies, right, we only acknowledge the fact that a study can transcend disciplines, right? But you will have a contribution being made to a particular discipline. And that is how important it is for you to know where you are contributing knowledge. Otherwise, you may think you are contributing knowledge to economics, and then the scholars will say, no, this is not economics, it's something totally different. But even if it is economics, you must know whether it is energy economics or it is development economics, or probably it is socioeconomics, right, etc. So that's what we are talking about. I don't know whether I've answered your question, Rochelle.
Thank you, Prof. You've answered it.
Yes, then there is somebody here, Justice. My question is a systematic literature review, the only way for students undertaking PhD by thesis to progress. Is it impossible to write a proposal without necessarily writing a literature review first, right? My answer is very simple. If you want to go to the moon by foot, you can actually start the journey. You can walk. If you want to use a bicycle, you can also do it. If you want to use a motorcycle, you can go to the moon using a motorcycle. You can even attempt using a plane, right? But there are those methods that will take you there. I'll tell you, a PhD that is done without undertaking a systematic literature review is very difficult to defend. Very difficult. And some of the things that you'll be saying after, especially when you are attacked by the scholars, right? And even some of your supervisors may attack you at some stage. Is for you to begin lamenting and saying, I will never do my PhD at Makerere University because all these supervisors are bad. They don't like us. They don't want us to progress, right? But I want to assure you that when you're undertaking a PhD, right, all the supervisors wish you well, right? Because they know that you are capable of doing it, right? Many of us who did our PhDs a long time ago using traditional methods, I can assure you all those traditional methods are obsolete and they can no longer apply today. And that's why we must learn. Actually, we must unlearn and learn, right? But I would also say, for the person who has asked a question, if you are a realist, right, and you are starting from what we call realism, philosophical orientation, you start with the reality out there, and you have an abstraction of reality, and you model that reality, and you follow it through using phenomenological research, right, tools. It is okay. You may not need a systematic literature review, right? But even then, at some stage, you may have to know what exists in that area. Now, the danger with the traditional literature review that most of us have been undertaking, if you can avoid it, please try to do it. But if you, from the other thing where you think that you are being punished by being asked to read around 500 journal articles or 400, you try out your method also, but be prepared to answer a number of questions. And you may even have to answer those questions at a time when you are defending your PhD. So if they give you 3 months to go and work on your thesis before you graduate, you shouldn't complain. But if you do systematic literature review and you do it very early, I can assure you will be on top of your work. And I can assure you, you'll be able to be ahead even of your supervisors. So they will be giving you guidance, but the knowledge base you'll be possessing, you will be great, right? When you go to a supervisor and you begin explaining and you articulate your motivation, etc., the fellow will be nodding his head and you'll be asking questions to learn from you. You will not be asking him what to do next. You will not be asking him for the model, for the variables, whether they are right or not. No, you'll be educating him. That is the beauty of undertaking a systematic literature review using the right questions. Have I answered your question?
Yes, Prof.
Right. I think what I will do in the interest of time, since we logged at 5:30 and now we are coming to 8, I will allow you to ask 2 more questions, and then thereafter I will hand over to Joseph to summarize and close. Then we shall have another lecture. Maybe I should ask Rochelle. Rochelle, which other day did we agree on? for our next lecture, so that next lecture I'll talk for 30 minutes, then I'll hand over to Joseph. I'll just complete stage 2, stage 3, and 4. I'll summarize and give a conclusion within the first 30 minutes, and then Joseph. Do not forget to bring a report so that your presentation is enriched by your colleague. So can I take 1 or 2 questions? Oh, Rochelle, first tell us the day. Which other day?
Friday at 5:30.
Friday at 5:30 this week. We shall be meeting again. We shall be using the same Zoom link.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Brenda, let me see what Brenda is asking. What if you identify that there already exists a systematic literature review that addresses the question laid out, the review protocol? Do you change the topic, or even, I mean, if the questions have been answered, what will be your objective of undertaking research? We do research to contribute knowledge. If work has already been done, what are you trying to tell us, right? And that's where I usually have problems with economists, right? You discover that most of the variables they usually explore, and I've always said this, are the same, right? They will be talking about issues of sectors, they will be talking about age, sex, education, and the rest of it. They rarely go out of those things, right? And for them, they believe that their contribution is in that area, right? Now, when you have an audience, right, that has other people that have other perspectives, then you need to rethink, right, the way you look at things, because these fellows will tell you that has already been done. So what else are you telling us? So it means that you must get out of your comfort zone and add a few other things, right, that scholars in that area may not have covered, so that you expand the knowledge base in that area. Right, so that was the last question that I have seen here. Right, may I then ask, let me see if there are other hands. Any other person would like to ask a question before I make 1 or 2 statements and hand over to Joseph? Any question?
Professor, yes, Professor, good evening and thank you. This is Lucy.
Yes.
I wanted to find out, I've just posted 1 question on the chat room, but maybe to clarify more, I wanted to know if I can use more than 1 such spring for my systematic literature review, or for example, can I just specify, for example, maybe can I just say, oh, I'll only focus maybe on Emerald and Google Scholar, or maybe I can choose maybe 5 more and I use that, or I need to only be specific to 1 for my systematic review.
I think there are a few things you are mixing up here. You are mixing up databases and search strings. Right, and luckily enough, Joseph is going to take us through practical steps that we follow, right, to do that. I think when we do it practically, we shall be able to understand. But if you had also entered a bit early, when Hassan was talking about databases, you would have known what databases are. And he gave an example of those major publishing houses having databases, including Emerald, EBSCOhost, and the like, right? All those have databases. Now, search strings, those are the words that we use, right? And for some of you who have entered the data in some software packages like SPSS, for example, you may have seen at one of the entries requiring you to specify whether you are dealing with the strings, right? Or probably what we call those specific variables where you are able to specify and give numbers, right? So for strings, that refers to usually qualitative data where you type a statement and so forth, right? So when we are searching here, you are going to type, whether even when you go to Google Scholar, you may type a word like energy transition, right? But there are also publications that don't use the word energy transition, but somehow they are talking about energy transitions. So you need to look for those particular words that are very close to energy transitions. So anyway, Joseph is going to handle that. But in terms of databases, the search is not complete without covering databases. So you need to cover databases. Databases is a must, and then you can also pick the rest from your Google Scholar and so forth, or other areas. As you see, the objective is to be as exhaustive as possible, right? If you're able to pick all the journal articles, right, and then use an inclusion and exclusion criteria, either by looking at the rankings, the journal rankings, right, or probably by looking at other aspects like those which are not published. Journal articles not published in English are not reviewed because we don't even understand. If a paper was published in Russian or probably Chinese, you can't review it. So you must specify the exclusion criteria and the inclusion criteria. Does that somehow answer your question, Lucy?
Yes, Professor. I just, in fact, I think I mistook the databases as a spring. So I'm sorry for that. I've learned. I just wanted to know majorly about the databases. That can I just specifically focus on one database, or I need to choose more than one? So, yeah, which at least you've given me the response that I
Yeah,
needed.
you must have.
Thank you.
You must have more than one. I mean, as many as you can. Right. I think, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to stop here, but maybe to remind you about a few things. As you may have noticed, our objective was to go through systematic literature review. And these are the aspects that we really set ourselves to cover. The introduction, we've already gone through it, the purpose, the typology, we've done that comparison aims, and now we are on the process of writing that we shall complete next time. So let me ask Joseph to come in and give some conclusive remarks and we close. Joseph, over to you.
Sorry, Professor, before you go, Professor.
Please, you know, it has started raining our side and it may go off any time, but yes, ask.
Yes, Professor. So I was asking, Professor, that when somebody uses a traditional literature review method, what justification can somebody give?
What?
What justification can you give because you have used the traditional literature review method?
It's not really justification. The beauty with the traditional literature review is that that's what most people are used to, and they may not even know the value of a systematic literature review. So I don't think they will give you a hard time unless you find the scholars who are really very serious and they say, well, we don't want you to do this, do this. But ideally, once you do a systematic literature review, you can even turn it around and be able to generate the other ideas, which more or less correspond to the traditional reviews. Here, we are not saying that this is the only thing that must be done. No. Again, when you are doing your PhD, listen to what your supervisors are telling you and follow their guidance. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending the lecture. Now over to Joseph Elasu.
Thank you very much, Prof. As usual, I keep writing my notes here as you make presentation. I just want to start by picking the last few words that Professor used while responding to Lucy. And the word exhaustive. And maybe Lucy, this is very important. Such strings or Boolean expressions, there is no way you can just have one, because you may not be able to catch as many articles as possible. Remember, you're using these words, different such words, because you want to try to go out there in the internet and pick as many articles as possible. Remember, not every article that you're going to pick using those such those such strings will be useful to you. And that's why if you hear Professor insisting on the inclusion and exclusion criteria, he's trying to tell us that not all the hits that you're going to receive from the search engine actually form what will be your data set. Of course, in this case, when we are talking about the data, we're actually talking about those articles that you're looking at. So the purpose of you having more than one such phrase or one such word is so that you're able to catch as many journal articles, as many publications as possible. Now, in regards to your databases, of course, Hassan was talking about databases, and maybe the only thing I probably would, for some of us who may be hearing some of these words and they seem disturbing, there is what we call the DBMS. The DBMS is a database management system. Now, a database is simply a collection of structured information. Okay, it could be it's actually published information, and this information is managed, and is controlled using a database management system. So they are completely different from the search strings. They are two different things. A search strings or Boolean words only help you to go to the database and streamline the kind of information you want. Because if you just go there, there's a lot of information, even what you don't need at that moment. So when you design your search strings, or actually you type strings, they are not springs, they are strings, search strings or Boolean words. So you are trying to define your scope. You're trying to say that I want articles in line with these so that others are excluded. I don't know if that can try to add to what Professor has already said. Okay, that said, Professor has made several comments and several words, which is going to make our next lecture really very simple, because there's usually a problem. If you think you're going to fall into starting to do a systematic review and possibly writing a paper that can be published without going through the basics, the foundational basics on this, it might become a problem. I have had a number of my friends, my colleagues in our cohort, who, for one reason or the other, have not been able to attend all our lectures. And up to today, the papers have failed people have failed to even finish the background alone. So this background information is very important and to help us when we are going to do the practical part of this. Because now we are left with two things: the actual extraction of the data, which is our articles, and then after extracting them, what do we do with them? You can extract as many as possible and you don't know even what to do with them. Then number two is, how do we probably summarize this information and make it useful? So I think for today, I would want to really thank you very much for taking your time to attend this lecture series, and we hope that you have benefited, just like me. I've benefited. I've had a lot of things, refreshment in my mind. And I want to say thank you very much to Professor and to all of you. And really, with those few remarks, I want to wish you a nice evening and declare our interaction today closed. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elasso. I had asked Dr. Austin to say something. Earlier on, we didn't have, I think I had a problem with the mic. Dr. Austin Mwange from Zambia, can you say something, please?
Okay, good evening, Professor.
Good evening, sir.
And good evening, colleagues. No, thank you, Prof. I followed through the entire lecture, and I think I've personally learned a lot. And a number of our students from the University of Zambia and other universities in the city, because there's a PhD group that I think where most of our PhD students in Lusaka are. Those who have time have noted that they have followed through seriously. And I think there's one PhD student from here, Mr. Smumba, Alex, who joined last, I think on Sunday night. It was his first time, and I think he did really appreciate a lot, and I'm happy I've seen. But most importantly, the work that you are doing and your generosity to allow us to participate, especially that we know that Makerere is actually regarded as one of the mother of universities in Africa. So we are so happy, because for us, Makerere means a lot in Zambia, and I think across the continent. So we'll be following through, Professor, and we are so grateful. We've learned a lot, especially your generosity and humility in teaching and accommodating each and every student. Thank you so much, Prof. Good evening, and good evening to everybody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Austin Mwange, and thanks colleagues and everyone who has attended. Let's tune in on Friday at 5:30 p.m. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Prof, and bye to everyone.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Prof. Good night.
Thank you, Professor. Good night.